All right, let's talk about the story of GPT-5, because it is a perfect case study of what happens when the incredible hype around a new technology slams right into the hard wall of reality. Let's get into it.
So where did all this hype even start? Well, you can pretty much point directly to this quote from OpenAI's CEO, Sam Altman. This wasn't just some off-the-cuff remark. This was the mission statement. He wasn't selling an update. He was selling a revolution. The expectation was literally a personal, all-knowing genius in your pocket.
And people were definitely paying attention. The live stream for the launch had 6 million people watching at the same time. I mean, those are numbers you see for the Super Bowl, not usually for a tech launch. This one number tells you everything you need to know about how excited the public was.
So you've got this massive promise, this huge audience. You'd think it was a guaranteed home run, right? Well, that's not exactly how it played out. Which brings us to the big question we're tackling here. Where did this all go off the rails?
Okay, so to really get why people were so let down, we first have to appreciate the sheer size of the mountain of expectations that GPT-5 was sitting on. The hype wasn't just a side effect, it was a core part of the product's identity before a single person even got to use it.
So what were they actually promising? I mean, the marketing was super clear. This was not supposed to be a slightly better GPT-4. They were selling a fundamental shift. The idea was an AI that wasn't just an expert in everything, but was also way faster, could reason better, and, this is a big one, was easier to talk to. You wouldn't need to be a prompt engineer anymore.
And then it launched. And almost immediately, that excitement turned into a massive wave of confusion, frustration, and just straight-up disappointment that completely flooded social media and tech forums.
Honestly, this slide pretty much sums up the entire story in just a few words. The expectation was a game changer. The reality, for so many people, felt like a step back. This one comment became a rallying cry for an entire community that just felt duped.
And look, this wasn't just some random troll on the internet. We're talking about a long-time paying subscriber. And check that out, 25,000 upvotes. That is a lot of people nodding along saying, yep, me too. The feeling was that the new model was clunky, robotic, and just plain worse than the old one. It wasn't just the users either. Prominent AI researchers like Gary Marcus started weighing in, and they were not holding back. He basically said GPT-5 was proof that the whole strategy of just make the models bigger was starting to fail. He saw it as a major red flag for the whole field.
Okay, so that's the backlash. But the big question is, why? What was actually going on under the hood that made the user experience so frustrating? To figure that out, we have to pop the hood and look at the engineering decisions that led to all these problems.
At the very core of GPT-5 was this new, really complex architecture called a dynamic routing system. Now, on paper, this sounds brilliant. The idea is to have a smart traffic cop that decides if your question needs a quick, simple answer or some deep, heavy-duty thinking. The goal was to be way more efficient. So here's the simple version of how it was supposed to work. You ask a question, a router model looks at it and decides how hard it is. Then it picks the right tool for the job from a whole toolbox of smaller, specialized models. Finally, it stitches the answer together so it looks seamless. You, the user, are never supposed to even know this is happening in the background. But that's where things got messy.
And this is where it all fell apart. This example with the SVG code is just perfect. A user could type the exact same prompt twice. The first time, the router might go, nah, this is easy, and hand it off to a lightweight model, which then spits out total garbage code. A minute later, you try again, and the router decides, whoa, this is complex, and sends it to the big guns, which gives you perfect, usable code. For a user, it was totally unpredictable. It felt like playing the lottery.
And for professionals, this kind of inconsistency is a total deal breaker. As this developer from Airbnb points out, the model was fine for little one-off tasks, but for a big, complex project where you need reliability, it was a disaster. And that's exactly where you'd want a PhD-level expert to shine.
These technical issues weren't just an annoyance. They had real, immediate, and expensive consequences for businesses that were trying to build on top of GPT-5.
First up, the cost. GPT-5 wasn't cheap. In fact, it came with a pretty steep price hike. Businesses were being asked to pay more for a product that was proving to be less reliable. And you can see here, it was way more expensive than its predecessor and nearly 3 times the cost of a major competitor like Claude.
Then came the hard data on performance. Independent testing found an 18% hallucination rate. Just think about that for a second. That means nearly 1 out of every 5 facts the model stated was just plain wrong. So what does that unreliability mean in the real world? It meant businesses reported needing 3.2 times more human oversight to constantly check the AI's work. So much for all those promised efficiency gains, huh?
And the final blow? The hit to the bottom line. An estimated 18% drop in API market share. And yeah, that number should look familiar. It seems there's a pretty direct line from an 18% error rate to an 18% drop in customers. A painful and very expensive lesson.
So, let's zoom out. What can we all learn from this whole saga? Because this story isn't just about one company's misstep. It's a snapshot of a very specific and very important moment for the entire AI industry.
This timeline puts it all in perspective using a classic model called the Gartner hype cycle. The original ChatGPT launch was the technology trigger. Then GPT-4 came along and was so mind-blowing that it took us to the peak of inflated expectations. And then boom, GPT-5 failed to deliver on that peak, and it sent the industry tumbling down into what's called the trough of disillusionment.
But here's the important thing about that trough. It's not the end. In fact, it's usually where the real sustainable progress begins. And this quote from Dr. Cynthia Breazeal at MIT just nails it. The lesson here is to shift our focus. The goal isn't just about replacing humans. It's about figuring out how humans and AI can become powerful partners.
And that leaves us with one final big question to think about. The whole GPT-5 episode proved that just being technically powerful isn't enough. So as we move forward, maybe the biggest challenge isn't about building smarter and smarter machines, but about building machines that are reliable, consistent, and transparent enough for us to actually trust them.